welcome back. Here we're going to continue in the siddhi section of our 45th harmonic, which is also codon 22 or gene key 22. Well, here we go. So far, I'm going to do a little sum up. And there's a lot of information here. There's a lot to do with some classic paradigms and not so classic paradigms, and how things all come together. And I've taken a little peruse forward, and we're getting into a very long section. It could be over an hour reading it to you. I really want to just, come down, if there was a basic description of this, if you wanted to really feel just that basic download. And it's simply this. To me, all of what we're about to get into represents the complexity of the mind. Sometimes even so complex that it becomes, would that, like an affront, like something being not enforced. What's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of that energy when something's just kind of there, and it's so there, and it doesn't really have to be, and it starts creating a wound because it's there, and it's not really getting the picture that it doesn't need to be there. Say, okay, but it doesn't have any awareness of itself. It's very ignorant of itself. And so, because we can't change it, the only way to stop the trauma from occurring with us is to dissolve our connection with it, to allow it to exist and be itself, but dissolve our connection with it in such a way that it would become a trauma. Do not resist its presence. Not that we're allowing it to be there in a way that all of a sudden we're going to listen to what it is, but we're going to allow it to pass through us. And I feel this is what's really talked about when we talk about grace. As this whole chapter really goes into what is opening up. It goes into the apocalypse. It goes into all of what we're confronting culturally, religiously, interpersonally, collective consciously, and coming into how we're surrendering into that grace. Well, let's get into it here. This 22nd siddhi, grace. The 7 sacred seals in the biological apocalypse. In the sacred book of Revelation, St. John the Divine wrote down his famous descriptions of the apocalypse, the so-called Judgment Day, where all world karma is finally redeemed and all human suffering brought to an end. Despite centuries of misunderstanding by religion, the revelation of St. John contains some of the greatest initiatic secrets ever written down. One of these secret teachings is known as the 7 sacred seals, in allegorical form. St. John describes the sequential process of the opening of each of the 7 seals by an angel, and the subsequent unfolding of the 7 stages of the apocalypse itself. It is not until the final 7th seal is opened that evil is conquered and humanity ascends to a higher plane. When we decipher this allegory, we can see that each of the 7 seals and its accompanying angel represents an agent of grace, an involving spiritual force or siddhi, descending from the higher vehicles and directly affecting human DNA. The apocalypse is really a biological phenomenon, a judgment day within our genes. As a new species of human prepares to be born, within the matrix of the 64 gene keys, there are 6 gene keys that directly reflect this involving power of grace. The 7th being the 22nd siddhi of grace itself, which is what we're covering here. So here we go. The first divine will, or the 40th. The second omniscience, or the 17th. And the third universal love, or the 25th. The fourth epiphany, or the 43rd. The fifth forgiveness, or the 4th. The 6th truth, or the 63rd. The 7th grace, or the 22nd. The 22nd siddhi of grace always works through the field of these 6 siddhis or divine attributes. Thus, we can see that each of these sacred seals is a divine code sent down from a higher consciousness to heal a specific aspect of the sacred wound. Just as there are 6 aspects to the sacred wound, so there are 6 divine aspects responsible for healing that wound. This process takes place both individually and collectively and is described below. The opening of the first seal, Divine Will. The first seal is opened by the siddhi of divine will, which heals human repression. Repression is the primary wound of humanity. Since it refers to the very storage of karma in the DNA of the physical body, it is because of the layers and layers of karma in your DNA that the higher subtle bodies are obscured from your awareness. Karma is a deep physical tension expressed as fear, and it inhabits every cell in your body. Only through the grace of the 40th siddhi can this karma be transmuted. The 40th siddhi represents divine will, which is the only force powerful enough to transform all the layers of tension. Divine will actually means complete relaxation, essentially a state of surrender. So as this seal opens toward humanity, the physical body finally comes into complete relaxation. As it relaxes progressively into deeper and deeper states, the higher subtle bodies can express themselves fully. In the end, your body becomes nothing more than a completely relaxed instrument of divine will, because this seal has to do with releasing core tension from the physical body at a collective level. It will eventually eradicate all disease from our planet. The opening of the second seal, Omniscience. The second seal is opened by the 17th siddhi of omniscience, and its target is the wound of denial. Denial is the external expression of fear, as anger and aggression. If your core wound is denial, then you are unable to see and take responsibility for your own negative behavior. The more someone tries to show you your denial, the more powerful it becomes. Through humanity, this wound expresses itself through fundamentalism, violence, and sexuality. The only force that can break denial is omniscience, which is what occurs when, even if only for a split second, your vision is opened and your higher bodies literally look down into your mental and astral bodies. This notion of being seen through comes as a deep shock to the recipient, who usually experiences a complete and permanent rebirth after the event. Once you can see your own denial, it is no longer denial. It is through the opening of this second seal that certain people experience sudden conversions or higher callings. At the collective level, the seal will bring great healing to human sexuality and will eventually extinguish violence. The opening of the third seal, Universal Love. The third seal is opened through the 25th siddhi of universal love. This is one of the most pervasive forms of divine grace, and as it reaches down into human beings, it triggers a huge wave of release that can spread from person to person, like a positive virus. This seal heals the human wound of shame. Shame is brought about by a profound feeling of worthlessness. It is out of this feeling of deep shame that the whole world of hierarchy and competitiveness has come about. As the siddhi of universal love descends in humanity, our urge to escape our own shame through selflessness and greed gives way to feelings of great joy and self-love. It is this self-love that leads to altruism and philanthropy, rather than competition. Shame is obsessed with hiding, but universal love shows you that no matter where you hide, love is still there. It is through the opening of this third seal that you finally begin to enjoy life for what it is, rather than always chasing some ideal future. As humanity experiences this opening, it will lead to a complete breakthrough in the way we use money and final ending to human greed. The opening of the fourth seal, Epiphany. The fourth seal is opened by the 43rd siddhi of Epiphany. It's symbolized by the descent of the dove of peace. Epiphany heals the wound of rejection, the wound that keeps human beings from opening their hearts fully to one another. Epiphany is actually a shattering experience in which the higher three bodies, symbolized by the gifts of the three magi of the Christian Epiphany, explode through into the lower bodies, opening the heart from the inside. As this seal is opened, the many barriers that humans have erected will begin to fall away. Our countries, borders, armies, and all aspects that attempt to protect and defend us from each other. On an individual level, the fourth seal opens the potential for you to lead a truly romantic life where you need hide nothing from anyone, essentially transparency, and in which you wear your heart openly on your sleeve. Once human beings overcome the fear of external rejection, they become pure agents of grace through their friendliness, openness, and honesty. On a collective level, the seal opens the heart center in humanity and manifests as kindness. This siddhi will bring an end to world poverty. I find this is a beautiful kind of description of how I see courage. And that energy there is the energy of what courage is. And that courage is the foundation of transparency. And the foundation of transparency is living from your heart specifically. And so that courage and transparency are kind of like the nest of your heart. The opening of the fifth seal, forgiveness. The fifth seal is opened through the fourth siddhi of forgiveness. As one of the great involving siddhis of grace, forgiveness has a special purpose, to work its way backwards into the collective DNA of humanity, releasing the many karmic blocks that plague the various gene pools. The fifth seal is specifically targeted to heal the patterns of unconscious guilt upon which karma is built. Guilt is built. Guilt is a kind of karmic debt which exists between one person and another, or even between one race and another. As the power of forgiveness works its way into the human genome, so many ancestral curses will finally be lifted. The seal in particular has the capacity to create world peace as individuals and whole nations forgive others the debts they are owed. The grace that comes with forgiveness has unprecedented power and brings a sense of true justice back to humanity. Forgiveness is a direct manifestation of the fifth body, the Buddhic body, which has the capacity to literally burn karma out of our DNA. At a collective level, the realizing of all this world karma will bring an end to war. The opening of the sixth seal, truth. As the final stage in the sequence, the seventh is the glorious afterglow. The sixth seal delivers the coup de grace. I don't really know what that means, as it heals the ultimate human wound, that of separation. Because to most of us the higher realities of our true nature are obscured, we have essentially been separated from the divine for most of our lives. Because we feel this separation so keenly, we constantly seek fulfillment in the outer world. Ironically, it is this very seeking that keeps us from experiencing our true nature, which is to be found deep within our own suffering. The opening of the sixth seal is made possible through the 63rd siddhi of truth. Truth is something you become one with rather than something you find out there. Through the opening of this seal, every individual will come to know their own nature as an aspect of one vast consciousness. Absolute truth is a collective phenomenon that will one day be fully embodied as the whole of humanity spontaneously recognizes itself as a single divine organism. Only then, at that marvelous moment, will all human seeking and striving come to an end. So it is that the 63rd siddhi, through its direct realization and expansive embodiment, will bring a crushing end to the great human curses, indifference. The opening of the seventh seal, grace. In the book of Revelations, the opening of the seven seals is surrounded by layer upon layer of rich apocalyptic imagery. Unless you are well versed in the alchemical symbolism, it will be very difficult for you to penetrate to the true meaning of this wonderful prophetic transmission. There is, moreover, a demarcation between the opening of the first six seals and the opening of the seventh seal. The seventh seal involves 7 angels and 7 trumpets, which sound the final judgment of humanity. The seventh seal is the spirit of grace itself, represented by the 22nd siddhi, and grace descends only after great transmutation. It is like the rainbow that appears after the great storm, bringing complete transfiguration. The 47th siddhi, on an individual level, the seventh seal represents the final absorption of all the previous 6 layers of the human aura into the monadic body, the primordial essence. At this level, even the flood of revelations and high frequencies of the atmic body must be surrendered into the void of what the mystics term the seventh heaven. We are told in the book of Genesis that God rested on the seventh day of creation, and this sevenfold pattern is reflected in many of other cultural traditions. In the Hindu system, when the seventh chakra, known as the Sahasrara, or the crown chakra, blooms, the divine essence can fully reunite with the material plane. St. John describes this event as the coming of a new heaven and a new earth, as this seventh monadic plane absorbs the final vestiges of our separateness. Each plane below and its frequencies disintegrate to be reintegrated as a true monadic essence. This is the meaning of the sounding of the seven trumpets, which represent the seven layers of frequencies of the human aura. At the collective level, the opening of the seventh seal refers to the coming of the final human epoch and the return of the human race to its original Edenic state. It is the great trumpet fanfare announcing the redemption of all beings. The meaning of spiritual initiation. The final aspect of the transmission through the 22nd gene key follows the story of the individual human soul itself. All human stories enact the same mythic process or storyline, albeit in infinite and uniquely diverse form, as their incarnative processes recycled into new and different forms, each activating different inferences of human DNA during each lifetime. Our great transgenerational story deepens. Like all great drama, we are weaving a multidimensional tapestry of different colors, tones, and hues, from which the rich fabric of experience. Throughout every incarnative story, however, stands one immutable question that keeps us coming back, the question of our suffering. It is our changing relationship to this question that marks the various stages in our journey through time and space. These are 9 major landmarks along the way, and they are known as the 9 portals of planetary initiation. Spiritual initiation can mean many different things to people. The word initiation itself might conjure up all sorts of mystical rites you may have witnessed or heard of. Certainly in tribal societies, initiation is seen as a rite of passage, particularly for young men who must perform some kind of test at a certain threshold age before entering full manhood. Other ancient teachings and/or societies have systems of initiation that are performed as elaborate rituals and certain stages in an aspirant's life. In truth, however, spiritual initiation is a natural organic process that occurs to all human beings at a certain point in their lives. In essence, initiation refers to the naturally unfolding stages of all spiritual awakening. Initiation occurs to you no matter what you are doing in your life, and once it has begun in earnest, when you have passed through the first initiation, it is irreversible and inevitable. The 9 portals of planetary initiation. The 9 portals of planetary initiation are a synthesis of the initiation rites of many different cultures and lineages. Listed below are the 9 stages, followed by brief introductions to each. Birth, baptism, confirmation, matrimony, annunciation, communion, ordination, sanctification, and glorification. The first initiation, birth. The first initiation marks the very beginning of your journey towards eventual transcendence and enlightenment. This initiation may pass with little or no recognition that anything has occurred within your consciousness. There comes a time in every soul's life when it has to move beyond its basic mammalian survival programming. The first stage of passing this threshold really concerns the development of the mental body. In your early evolution, you are simply overwhelmed by the desire nature of the astral body, and this remains the central focus of your whole being. First, it is interested in survival. Then, having mastered survival, it becomes interested only in pleasure. Lifetimes follow in which pleasure is pursued in any and every possible way. In one sense, the soul is trying to define what pleasure or happiness is and how it can be captured. Despite fleeting glimpses of happiness, the soul fails in finding true fulfillment through the outer senses and gradually turns its lens on the real prize, suffering itself. In looking into the nature of suffering, the mental body must first detach itself from the astral body, which means that for the first time the soul must consider its own nature. This turning inward marks a huge shift in focus in the life of the soul, because in looking at its own nature, it must also begin to consider the feelings and thoughts of others. In the deepest sense, the first initiation is a birth out of selfishness and into service in its broadest form. It is marked by the ability and willingness of an individual to accept responsibility for his or her actions. It is the birth of a true morality, not in the sense of adhering to an outer code or set of laws, but of the natural human spirit of helpfulness and harmlessness. After the first initiation, the soul becomes aware that the greater pleasure is derived from giving than from taking, and this becomes the foundation of higher life. In the world around us today, many people have passed through the first initiation. There is no set of beliefs or any common mission that unites these people, save that of wanting to leave the world a better place for future generations. They can be spiritual, aesthetic, opinionated, even dogmatic, but they cannot be indifferent to their own or another's suffering. And this is what makes them so powerful and so precious. The second initiation, baptism. The second initiation is very different from the first. Whereas the first initiation is a general buildup of basic human goodness over a long period, the second initiation of baptism comes as a surprise. As the second initiation, the spirit of grace descends through the layers or bodies of form and bestows a moment of higher contact upon the recipient. Baptism, or breakthrough, is a sudden immersion in the higher frequencies of your own higher vehicle. And as such, I would say higher or more attuned vehicle. Because I find it can be a little bit misdirecting to constantly have this higher or lower when really everything is connected. And personally, I'll talk more about this in the commentary, but I really see things spherically. And as we begin coming into the fifth dimension, the idea of the separation or hierarchical based descriptions, higher, lower, that kind of thing, begins to dissolve and yield to the spherical compound of everything is connected. And that connection, its so-called difference, is defined by different vibratory levels, but it's not necessarily higher or lower. So you can say that you have a lighter or a frequency that is more attuned to the source, and that's your so-called higher vibration, but it is no way in separation from the other aspects of self. And so through this grace is helping us find a transparency, which is allowing us to dissolve our separation and our identity with the kind of self-proclaimed negative patterns that all of these things kind of represent by being called lower. And so we're kind of embracing those and allowing ourselves to bring in and allow the forgiveness to touch all those aspects, and so they become part of us. We're not actually moving them away or judging them or pushing them away. We're allowing them to integrate. And so we're dissolving our separation agreements is what we're doing here. Baptism or breakthrough is a sudden immersion in the higher or more attuned frequencies of your own vehicles, and such it always comes as something of a shock. As with all shock, it takes a long time to come to terms with what has happened to you. The duration of the experience varies greatly from person to person, and as the higher frequencies subside, the lower bodies are left with the task of recalibrating and readjusting to the influx of the new frequencies. During this period of readjustment, many things may take place within an individual. The existing mental framework tries to place the experience within its old paradigm or within a paradigm recognized by society. Many peoples experience the second initiation as a higher calling into the great religions. Others continue to grapple with the experience, and many even go through a mental or nervous breakdown. Another common response is prolonged depression and a longing to return to the higher frequency state. Still, others may even go into denial and try to forget the experience altogether. Baptism, as such, can be extremely challenging, as it sets you apart from the rest of society in some way. It is, in a sense, a kind of purgatory, since you have tasted the higher life and can never entirely forget it. If You are able to handle the frequencies of the higher bodies and can incorporate the experience clearly in your life. Grace will periodically revisit you and baptize you in the higher frequencies of the causal body. The second initiation is an ongoing baptism in your higher reality, and the more readily the experience is digested, the more energy becomes available to you. We need to remember that the bodies above the causal body constitute your higher self, frequencies down into the lower vehicles. You know exactly how and when to allow the higher frequencies down into your lower vehicles. The period after the second initiation may also last many lifetimes as the causal body gains a stronger foothold over the astral and mental bodies, the sexual and intellectual faculties. Baptism is thus an initiation into purification, in which your lower essence are gradually refined in order to be able to hold a more sustained higher vibration. The third initiation, confirmation. In some traditions, the third initiation is understood to be the first true initiation, because it is not until this confirmation arrives that a person becomes stable in their purpose of seeking the divine. Confirmation is another gift of grace that is given as a kind of reward to the recipient. It is evident from their names that these initiations are taken from Christian tradition. Their mystery can further understood through the original layout of the Christian church. The birth represents the entry into the church itself, the body of the higher presence. The baptism is always made at the front, which is usually located at the back of the church, between the entrance and the congregation, and represents the introduction of the child as a member of the church. During Christian confirmation, a young person is officially initiated as a member of the congregation, whose arena is the main body of the church itself. Confirmation gives the young church member their first taste of a much higher initiation, that of the Holy Communion. In the list of the 9 initiations above, you can see that they are laid out in threes. This is one of the great mysteries of initiation, which is based upon final immersion into the Holy Trinity. At each of the 3 levels, the seeker enters into deeper communion with the triple nature of the Trinity. Thus, at the 3rd initiation, the seeker has a taste of the 6th initiation, and very faintly detects the echo of the 9th. So it is with each of the other levels. This is actually similar to the wave spell, in where the first day reflects the 5th, the 9th, and the 13th. The second day reflects the 6th, second, 6th, and 10th. Then it is the 3rd, 7th, and 11th, and then it is the 4th, 8th, and 12th. There's a triangulation, and so the way they're representing this is the kind of like fractal pulsar. It is within each of the other levels. Confirmation is actually a very high vibratory initiation. It denotes having reached a stable frequency, strong, and your lower nature. It denotes having reached a stable frequency in which your commitment has been tested and found strong. It denotes having reached. We did that. And your lower nature has shown itself to be capable of some degree of sacrifice. Wow. A lot of burpiness here. A lot of talking and moving and stuff in my body. At this level, the mystery of sacrifice is understood to be the deepest core of initiation itself. Here, at confirmation, you will grasp the certainty of your final goal, in which your lower nature will be sacrificed to your higher nature. Well, my lower burping nature was just sacrificed to my higher vocal nature. After the 3rd initiation, it is no longer possible for you to leave the path of initiation, even though you will inevitably stray from it at times. This is a level of frequency in which you become used to more regular periods of contact with the higher vehicles. The pathway between the causal body and the mental body is well trodden, which means that simply by heartfelt invocation you can now call upon grace. The 4th initiation, matrimony. The 4th initiation represents the higher octave of the 1st initiation of birth, Matrimony is a birth into a higher dimension. It is a spontaneous inner commitment that greatly widens the pathways of awareness inside your being. The initiation of matrimony or marriage is one's first step into the collective way of life. In the Christian mystical traditions, matrimony represents the marriage of the seeker to Christ, a very deep level of commitment that actually led to the beginning of the monastic tradition. The modern cultural institution of marriage still contains many of the secret initiatic rites that mark the high stages of consciousness. The primary symbol of matrimony is the wedding ring, the emblem of sacred union and divine perfection. The fourth initiation marks the beginning of the higher life, in which your primary focus is to incarnate the causal body fully onto the physical plane. This means that your life's work is now offered in service of the whole, and there is no difference between your work and worship. The well-known wedding vow, until death do us part, now becomes your living reality, and your only true beloved is the higher self of your divine consciousness. Externally, this period of your life story is usually marked by deep service to humanity, in which you are much concerned with improving the welfare of those less fortunate than yourself. You may recall that the causal body is the body of our enduring virtue, before the sum total of all that is good about us. After the fourth initiation, our lower nature becomes increasingly more organized by the causal body. Our sexual energies, in particular, are channeled into creative work of a higher nature, just as physical marriage precedes the raising of a physical family. So this higher marriage can lead to a vast surge in creativity that can involve, and awaken many others. It is of interest to note that it is not just individuals who move through the great initiations, but also entire species. Humanity has in fact passed through the fourth initiation during the past few hundred years. Our matrimony has vastly improved the state of the world in which we live. The steady growth of global awareness is outstripping individual greed. Politically, the rise in democracy and social justice has changed the face of the planet. Gradually, human goodness is moving us forward, even though news headlines do not often reflect this truth. To understand initiation, you must read between the lines, and you must feel the truth within your heart as much as you see it with your mind. As a species, we are closer than we have ever been to the ideal of working together collectively as a single unified organism. Matrimony has many hidden meanings. It can refer to the marriage of opposites of East and West, science and religion, the masculine and the feminine inside your DNA. It speaks of a fusion, an intense period in which the many opposites within your being mystically come together into greater harmony than ever before. In the analogy of the church, it is where you are singled out within the congregation and approach the higher altar. Together with your betrothed, it is represented in the sacred geometry of the church by the crossing and the great side windows of the nave. The open arms of the church lying between the congregation and the choir. It is a place of expansion where the body of the church opens on both sides like two spreading wings. This is exactly what the fourth initiation denotes. A time in which you open your heart into the world and spread your wings to the winds of the Holy Spirit of grace. The fifth initiation, Annunciation. The fifth initiation flows naturally from the fourth, and at this level of expanded awareness, the initiations often follow each other in relatively quick succession, that is, within a single lifetime. Now that you are married to your higher consciousness, the next thing that happens is that you become pregnant. This is the Annunciation, the mystical announcement of the imminent birth of the Christ. Much of the symbolism surrounding this fifth initiation is feminine in origin, flowing as it does from the third aspect of the Sacred Trinity, the Holy Mother. On the lower planes, the feminine is expressed through the astral plane, the desire nature, and the emotions. At the higher level, this plane relates to the fifth or Buddhic body. At the fifth initiation, the exquisite emanation of the refined currents from the Buddhic body begin to penetrate the lower astral nature. This is a deeply tantric phenomenon in which you experience the sublimation of your sexuality into pure spiritual essence. The Annunciation is a chemical phenomenon that saturates your whole being, just as a woman during pregnancy is flooded with hormones, so you become aware that your body is being purified and cleansed in preparation for a great inner event, the birth of Christ consciousness. In the analogy of the church, this initiation relates to the situation of the choir, who presides over the altar, who represent the voice of the pure worship of the Godhead. The connection between the throat center and the sexual center also becomes clear during this initiation. When a person spontaneously enters a higher ecstatic state that appears to be ongoing, it is a fair assumption that they are entering this fifth portal of the Annunciation. Many different mystical traditions speak of this magical time of higher pregnancy in which the immortal fetus is gestating inside our solar plexus center. It is one of the great enduring mysteries of creation. In terms of the initiation of species, humanity stands at the threshold of the fifth initiation today. Even now there are whispers in the air of a new form waiting to come into this world. Little do we realize that this form is gestating inside our very DNA. The timeline for a species to undergo any initiation is obviously very different from an individual. And for humanity, it may take many hundreds of years for the Annunciation to become realized. We are about to enter a time of great purification in which the feminine spirit of grace will be working actively in the world. The fact is that as a species, we have already been fertilized and are in the very first stages of pregnancy. Just as the body of a woman takes several weeks and months to register the changes externally, humanity will not become generally aware of the great change that is upon it for some considerable time. Only those who are sensitive to the subtler currents moving beneath the world of matter will detect the first signs of the new human that has now begun its period of gestation. The sixth initiation, communion. The sixth initiation is the greatest experience a human being can have. It represents the zenith of our human development and the end of our evolution on the earth. The mystery of Holy Communion is the mystery of sacrifice. This is the full awakening of the Christ consciousness in a human vehicle, which requires the death of that which identifies with the principle of form itself. This stage is often referred to as enlightenment. The light referred to is the pure light of the sixth body, the Atmic body, which is born from within the Buddhic body, and enlightens the lower three bodies. As it does so, it causes the causal body to dissolve, thus severing the link or bridge between the lower and higher worlds. In mystical terms, this involves the dissolution of the soul, that aspect of human consciousness that is drawn again and again into incarnation. Thus, it is said that at the point of enlightenment, the indwelling awareness can no longer take incarnation and forever escapes the wheel of samsara or illusion, also the wheel of karma. The initiation of communion also shares its name with the 45th siddhi, which describes the great mystery of the taking of the sacred sacrament. The communion involves the direct imbibing of divine consciousness at the altar. In entering this field of frequency, you are transcending all sense of being separate from others. This is symbolized by the blood of Christ and marks the final breaking up of the karmic residue held in your DNA. For the grace of Christ to enter you, you must be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, to give up your lower bodies and their desires, feelings, memories, dreams, and knowledge, and to be taken over by the greater being who has been waiting all along within you. To enter this great initiation is to die into the second aspect of the sacred Trinity, the Christ. The higher evolutions and the seventh, eighth, and ninth initiations. The remaining three initiations are part of what is called the higher evolution, which lies beyond humanity and our human story. As such, they are difficult to describe in words, and certain binding oaths surrounding them in order to protect humans from their dangerous frequencies. These frequencies are no longer conveyable other than through sound or through direct transmission in silence. Even so, the higher evolution has always been known about the fragments of truth concerning it can be found throughout human culture. In the Christian Church, the higher evolution is represented through the priesthood and its hierarchies. I'm going to allude to something of my own personal work, because I feel that there is a frequency that does speak to this. And if you're familiar with the tree of life, not its particular geometry, but simply just the generalization of the tree of life and the top sphere, around it are three kind of auric layers. One is Ein, one is Ein Sof, and one is Ein Sof Or. This is specifically speaking about Ein, Aeon, Ein Sof, Aeon Sophia, Ein Sof Or. Aeon Sophia, and I'm not going to go into the rest of what that word says, because I personally discovered it in my own right, and I will not project that upon any of you. I will, however, invite you into that fold when the time comes, because much of this work, the stuff that we're covering here, is actually more of the foundational, entry-level stuff that becomes the stable reference points that allows us to propel ourselves into a sustainable dynamic, which allows us to bridge that gap and show up within these next levels of initiation as a complete endowment of embodiment. Now, one of the fundamental essences that becomes paramount, and this is why for many who really still have the more male caliber installed in their psyche and their emotional body and everything, yes, the idea of male or yang is also a psyche or a syntax modeling. And so as we begin to embody the totality of the divine feminine as the mother goddess, then we begin to open up that inner womb space, that inner realm of initiation. This is this ascension into the fifth dimension that I reference every once in a while, and there are very specific formulations that begin to shape who we are on the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual arenas of our own self-realization. And so, yes, they are highly dangerous. Why? Because if you are not ready to fully let the aspects of yourself which hinder your evolution, the only things you will find there are the greatest of demons. Because those demons are those things manifested into the most absolute form within you that you have not yet let go of. They are what your fear, what your doubt, all the things that you are inside, which is your cultivation of separation, becomes a reflection which within you becomes a manifestation of true evil. And so the reason I go into this is because these works only cover so much, and they explain into the abstract using a phenomenally abstract format. In fact, this particular gene key, the 22nd gene key, in all three of its phases, shadow gift and siddhi, touches a little more on the architectural dynamic and specifications of the sacred geometries behind and founding ascension, though using specifically the definitive aspects of kind of the Christian mythology, which is only one of the many particular mechanics that are propagating the fundamentalism that is this mathematical, psychogeometrical, universal truth that's being touched upon here. So a big part of the work, if not the entire thing in a resonant level, is what this whole 1320 system Tzolk'in Mayan calendar is about, is it's really not about telling time. It's about forging and embodying the vibrational avatar that you are in these so-called higher or more integrated dimensional constants, so you're less and less and less separate, more and more whole. And as you do that, you naturally become initiated into these planes of existence, into these absolute states beyond time, states beyond projection, perception, and mind. And so yes, at the level of separation and objectivity, it is dangerous to even imagine what these types of initiations and their own personal rites are. Okay, let us continue. I feel that was very clear. The seventh initiation of ordination has much to do with the notion of coordination, and these incarnations point humanity in specific new directions. It is through these beings that the higher secrets of initiation may be released. The presence of such beings in the world always precipitates a great shift in the consciousness of the whole planet. Interestingly, there are always 5 avatars present on the earth at any given moment. They form a unified force field that steers the balance of humanity towards evolution rather than destruction. The 8th initiation of sanctification is an extremely rare event on our planet. Initiations at this level are really beyond human understanding, as they have to do with the flow of essence from the 7th monadic body into the atmic and buddhic bodies. Although it does occasionally occur on the individual level with spectacular results, the 8th initiation is a collective initiation that can only be taken towards the end of humanity's evolution, essentially our evolution into collective consciousness. And though that terminology, evolution into collective consciousness or ascension to collective consciousness, only actually alludes to our sense aspect as an individual yielding to the interdimensional awareness birth of recognizing a singular awareness present within multiple units, which is really a macrocosmic scale and is no different than the way there is a singular awareness within our own individual body, which you could say is held in space by the complementary force of trillions of cells and micro atomic individual units of the human individual. And so the whole thing comes down to the containment field for this anchorage of awareness. And so the ascension to collective consciousness is really only saying the showing up of that awareness and the resolution definition of how that awareness is being factored by the many and the one, and where it's sitting, the anchorage. Now, this doesn't speak to what we're doing in that space. What kind of responsibility, what kind of power, what kind of universe, what kind of reality itself is present, as that kind of awareness is actually perceiving the new fundamentalities of the respective creation. The 9th and final initiations bring an end to the story of consciousness. On an individual level, the 9th initiation can only take place through silence. In certain esoteric tradition, it is also referred to as the refusal. After this initiation, the indwelling awareness refuses to materialize and dissolve back into the primordial essence from which it was born. Tradition tells us that only a few great initiates have taken the 9th initiation to date. It is during this final initiation that the 1st and 7th body fuse together. The physical form then ascends and completes its final great destiny, the new heaven and the new earth. One can see from the depth of its transmission that the 22nd siddhi is difficult to describe in words. The reason for this is that you need to experience it in order to know what it is. Although grace is a word that is often used in spiritual circles these days, it should not be used lightly. Rather, it needs to be treated with the utmost respect. We have learned that grace has to be earned through graciousness. This is the great message of the 22nd siddhi, or jinki. To find graciousness in the face of suffering, and perhaps even to find something more, holiness in itself wearing a disguise. If the 22nd gene key happens to be an aspect of your hologenetic profile, then the theme of grace will be very strong in your life, and you must not turn your face away from the pain life offers you. We are all here to be tested over and over, until we show that our faith in nature herself can never again be lost. Grace is a presence that descends on humanity, and like all the siddhis, it requires that we meet it halfway, which for us humans may seem a very long way. This is, after all, a perfected state in which everything about you and your life will be changed permanently. When true grace descends, it wipes out all your past karma in a flash. It also wipes out the karma of all your ancestors and their ancestors. Grace softens your rough edges, puts a permanent end to your fear, and leaves you in no doubt whatsoever about your divinity. It also ensures that you never again forget. It is impossible to measure in the words the sheer number of blessings that grace bestows when it alights on us. One who has been touched by grace is always touched by grace. If it happens to you 1 millennia ago in another universe or another incarnation, it will never leave you. It will go on bathing you again and again. To be in the presence of someone manifesting this siddhi is to be entranced by the aura of love that surrounds them. It is something you can never forget, and it will stir your own soul to seek it until you find it. Grace is the very breath of the divine. It is always there, waiting for us high above. If we only persist in our sacrifices, wherever there is oppression, there is the possibility of grace. If you can face oppression with a gracious spirit and a forgiving heart, grace will come to you sooner or later. Grace is a feminine spirit, and she cannot resist giving herself to those who smile in the face of adversity. As we saw with the 22nd shadow, there is nowhere you can hide in this universe. Everything is heard and recorded. Neither can you hide from grace. Grace is your true nature. It is your inheritance. It is the soul of the world. It is also a state that is beyond the laws of our world. If grace touches you, you no longer create karma. If grace touches you, you no longer have your own destiny, but become a musical instrument tuned and played by the gods/the goddess. With grace, all human emotion is instantly transformed into love. It is not a state which most human beings are very familiar with. As a species, however, we are moving into a new epoch that will be marked by grace. As each of the 7 seals is opened, the world we have become used to will begin to drop away or dissolve, and in its place will rise, shining and resplendent as the summer sun, the new heaven and the new earth that St. John talked about in his great revelation. Now that you have imbibed this profound transmission that is the 22nd gene key, it is recommended that you give it some time to digest within the many layers of your being. As a feminine spirit, grace calls upon each one of us to listen and receive her message and blessings. Above all, remember this. Through grace, the universe has but a single wish, for you to remember that you are love, and there is nothing in you but love. Beautiful journey, that one. Definitely some contradicting information there for me. There is some definitions that I would have done differently, but other than that, I feel the message, is very aligned. And that will sum up the siddhi of the 22nd gene key, which is the 45th harmonic in the Zolkin, the last harmonic in the 9th run, or the throat chakra. Very appropriate because the throat chakra is the 5th dimension, is our ascension into the 5th dimension. Stay tuned for the commentary episode.